you delighting in this week? What are the things that you're taking delight in, the things that you're longing for, the things that are exciting you as you look ahead to this next week? As we look ahead to next Sunday's sermon, we're continuing through Ezra, and we're going to look at Ezra making his return trip to Jerusalem. And as he prepares to do that, one of the things we find out about Ezra in Ezra chapter 7 is that Ezra committed himself to knowing God's Word and teaching God's Word. And it could be said of Ezra that he delighted in God's Word. He wanted to know it. It was a joy to him to pursue it and learn it, so that way he could know it himself, but also share it with others. And so, again, what are you delighting in this week? Oftentimes it's those things that end up shaping us and informing the type of people we will be. Listen to a few verses from Psalm 19. Perhaps the overall theme of Psalm 19 could be taking delight in God's Word. And so listen to what the author of Psalm 119 says about God's Word. Verses 1 and 2 of Psalm 119. How happy are those whose way is blameless, who walk according to the Lord's instruction. Happy are those who keep His decrees and seek Him with all their heart. The psalmist is saying that in general, those who pursue God's Word and seek to know it are happy. They're happy because their way is blameless. They're happy because they know that they are living their life the way that they should. Again, in verse 9, how can a young man keep his way pure? By keeping your word. It is by keeping God's Word that we can be sure that we're living the way that we ought to live. Verse 25, my life is down in the dust. Give me life through your word. The psalmist says that it is through God's Word and knowing God's Word and applying it to our lives that we find what is truly life. Verse 49, remember your word to your servant. You have given me hope through it. We have hope through God's Word because of the truth that it transmits into our lives. Verse 74, those who fear you will see me and rejoice, for I have put my hope in your word. Again, we have hope in God's Word. It is a sure foundation for our hope. And then lastly, verse 105, your word is a lamp for my feet and a light to my path. We delight in God's Word because through His Word, He shows us the way that we ought to go. We may not have all the answers when we want to have them, but we have the promise that God will guide us through His Word. And so, again, what are you taking delight in this week? What are the things you long for? What are the things that excite you? What are you forming your life around and pursuing this week? I would encourage you to read Psalm 119 and consider how you can take delight in God's Word, how you can form your life around it, how you can let it inform the way that you ought to live. And so read God's Word, choose to know God's Word, and choose to take delight in God's Word this week. Have a blessed day.